and welcome. This is Shanne Carvalho coming back to you with another episode. And today we have Scott Kumler, real estate veteran out of Phoenix, Arizona. And we're going to show you how you can start from day one and become a scaling machine in building your business and selling more and more year over year. Really excited to have you on, Scott. Welcome.
Yep. Awesome. Appreciate being here, and I'm excited to jam out with you.
Yeah, man. So look, talking a little bit off camera, just kind of getting to know, kind of what you've done with your business and everything. Didn't really get a chance to really dig in. I believe that you might be partnered with your wife, or it's more of a, structure within the family. Tell me a little bit about what got you into real estate and, how you're set up.
Yeah. So first I'll kind of take you back to a different state, actually. So I'm in the Phoenix, Arizona area now. But I used to live in Illinois, and I've always been in kind of retail management. And so, 1 year, it was January, and it was, I got done working a 10-hour day, because I work about 50 to 60 hours a week. I got off work, and I got a flat tire right after leaving work in like -5-degree weather. So it actually took me 2 hours to change my tire because my lug nuts were frozen. And so I was so upset at that point that I called my wife up and I'm like, that's it, we're moving to Arizona. And so I actually went home, sat down at the dinner table with her, took out a yellow notepad, and kind of laid out the exact plan that we were going to take to move to Arizona and get into real estate too, because I was tired of working in retail management. The idea was very fluid at the time, but I did apply for some jobs, down in the Arizona area. Ended up getting a job at another retail manager or another retail store that was going through a huge growth phase at that point, and got hired on as an assistant store director. And so me and my wife, after I made that comment, we're probably down in Arizona about 2 months later, sold our house, moved down to Arizona. And so at that point, we decided to rent a home. We were actually getting a house built at that point, but we decided to actually rent an apartment when we first moved down to Arizona. And so I started working this new job, working at, 50, 60 hours a week in training. And then, at the beginning was going pretty good. Everything was going smooth. It's like, okay, I don't know if I'm really going to get into real estate. I don't know if this is really going to work out. Maybe I'll just stay working at this job, for a while. And then things kind of started changing because at the time, this grocery store was going through a huge growth phase. So they actually started building a bunch of new stores. And so what happens when they build a bunch of new stores is they take away resources from stores that are already existing, because they have to put everything into the new businesses. And so what ended up happening was they started cutting our payroll. And so when typically a company starts cutting payroll, what do they expect you to do as a salary manager? Work more hours. So I started working about 60. My minimum schedule is about 60 hours a week. So it's about 6 10-hour days every single week. So it's only scheduled off 1 day a week. And so fast forward to, about November that year, I had a friend that was coming to visit me from out of state, and they're going to come down and stay with us. And so I go to my boss and I'm like, hey, I know I can't, take off the weekend, but they're coming down on Friday. Do you mind if I take, off Friday to go pick them up? And then can you give me off Monday and Tuesday so I can spend the day with them, and then Tuesday drop them off at the airport? And my boss is like, I don't know, we'll see what happens. There's no guarantees, but I'll see what I can do. Schedule comes out, ended up making me work every single day while my friend was there. And so I was so upset at that point that basically the day after my friend left, I went into real estate school and signed up for a real estate class. And so I called my wife. I remember to this day, I called my wife up right after signing up for school. And I'm like, hey, honey, I signed up for real estate school. And she's like, you did what? I'm like, I signed up for real estate school. I told you we were going to do this. She's like, yeah, I thought you would talk to me about this before you actually went ahead and did that, And I'm like, well, too bad. I already signed up for real estate school. I'm going to become a real estate agent. And so at that point, I was still working. We were having a house built. And so my goal was to get my license while I go through real estate school while my house is being built. And then my goal was to officially become active right around the time that my house was getting ready to close. And so ended up going through real estate school, after, obviously I was working 60 hours a week, but anytime I was off, or any, after work or, days off, I would be going to real estate school. The point where I actually didn't have a day off in like 2 months just because I was doing real estate school on every single day that I was working. So it took me about 2 months, passed my test. And then I remember closing on our house in Goodyear. And the day after I closed on my house in Goodyear, I went into work and gave my 2-week notice, and decided to quit my job. So at the point, my wife was super nervous about it because she's like, all right, you're quitting your job, getting into real estate, and she was like really upset because she's like, I'm going to be stuck working in retail and supporting us and all that stuff. So the time when I quit my job, I'm like, don't worry, honey, I'm never going to allow you to work another day or never work another holiday in retail management again, because she's a bakery manager at the time. So that summer, so I started, out in real estate, started crushing open houses. That's kind of how I built my business up. Did 22 open houses my first 25 days of real estate. Did 5 open houses a week, every single week for my first 6 months. It took me about 4 months to get my first paycheck. So it was right at the end of June, where I got my first closing, which is super exciting. Then about 2 weeks later, my wife on her way to work, ended up getting a terrible car accident. So she actually got T-boned on her way to work, ended up tearing both her ACLs, tore her rotator cuff, and had a hernia disc in the back of her neck. So fortunately, I came out really working hard, because at that point, since my wife got in this car accident, she basically went out on disability because she couldn't work. So she ended up going out on disability. And while she wasn't able to work, I basically said, well, you're not, working anyways. You might as well get your real estate license. So like any good husband, I told her to go to real estate school at that point, because obviously it wasn't, physical activity that she needed to, going to real estate school is not really a physical activity. So she ended up getting her real estate license during that point. Because I came out working so hard, with open houses, by, like I said, month 4, I got my first transaction or contract. By, but the next 2 months, I closed another 7 homes. So fortunately, that was kind of started that momentum. And so, fortunately, her disability, for my wife, took her through the holidays. But basically, then at the beginning, about mid-June, her work contacts her and says, hey, your disability's run out. You either need to quit or come back to work. So at the point, she's like, all right, well, I'll try to go back to work. I remember, to this day, I was actually at home, with my dad, because my dad was, he had cancer at the time. So I was kind of going home and, kind of helping him out, and he was kind of, at this point, he's kind of put in hospice. So I remember at this point,
Wow.
when I was at home, my wife called me up, and she was in just extraordinary pain. She's like, I haven't been healed from the accident. I'm in so much pain. She's like, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, well, quit your job. And so she ended up quitting her job at that moment as well too. She gave her 2-week notice. They forced her to stay throughout the holiday through Valentine's Day, because it's around February. But she ended up getting into real estate full time with me as well too. And so that's kind of our journey, what got us into real estate. So both of us now are full time real estate agents, and we've started a team a couple years ago, and it's been an amazing journey ever since.
What an incredible story. That's crazy. What a sequence of events. So look, I mean, the first thing is, like, before you move, honey, I'm gonna get my real estate license, or let's go to Arizona and stuff. Like, I want to move. Like, even when you then moved and then said, hey, I'm gonna get my license, like, it didn't sound like she was very happy about that. Did you have to use your sales skills to bring the peace, or what?
Well, I mean, I have a decent amount of sales skills. Fortunately, my wife is very supportive, so she gets nervous, but
Gotcha.
she doesn't like change. So she basically would follow me kind of wherever I want, whatever I wanted to do. She's supportive when it comes to that. So
Gotcha.
at first I was going to move to Arizona. She didn't like my original plan, which is basically drive for Lyft and then move to Arizona, so she's like, that's not really, so fortunately I got a job at the time, which helped with that transition. She obviously didn't mind moving to Arizona. It was just a very short period, because we basically, I made that declaration, I think at the end of January. I started applying for jobs while I was, I got a phone interview for this grocery store here, while I was working my other job. I ended up leaving work at that place to act like I was going to pick up ice cream to do the phone interview while I was in the car. Then we went to come visit we were going to come visit friends for spring training in March. And we're going to kind of look at houses at that point. The guy said, my friend set me up with this real estate agent to come look at houses while we're down here. While we're actually at the airport, I got a phone call from that employer saying, hey, I got the job. And then they're like, when can you be down here to take the drug test? And I'm like, well, I'm actually at the airport right now, getting ready to fly down to Phoenix. So I could be down there tomorrow and do the drug test. So, while we were down here visiting our friends, we caught a spring training game. We ended up buying a home. We ended up finding an apartment to rent. And I ended up doing my drug test while we're down here. And so then when I go back from this little trip, I go to my previous employer and say, hey guys, I'm giving you a 2-week notice, which really is only a week and a half notice, because I got to drive to Arizona in about a week and a half, so it kind of all worked out in a row. And then when I first got my license too, I mean, she trusted me and she trusted my work ethic. So she was very supportive. I think she was very nervous. I do know, like, when I first got my license, for the first few months, she's like, okay, when do I start worrying? Because, obviously it takes a while to kind of build up that momentum, and so she's like, when I start worrying, and I'm like, don't worry, honey, I got this. I've got people I'm shopping with now, blah, blah, blah. And then after that, like I said, my first check was in about 4 months after I first got into real estate. But then it kind of starts snowballing downhill from there, where just, my first full year, I got close to 18 homes, second full year, 34 homes, third full year, 36 homes, just kind of kept snowballing downhill. And then the great thing about it too, is I was able to kind of start scaling back the amount of open house I was doing, because by that point, I was getting a lot of referrals, repeat business, sphere, and as you become more successful, people start reaching out to you naturally. So I no longer had to go out there and hunt for my business like I did that first year.
So then when she got her license, did she join you and you partnered up, or was she kind of doing her own stuff?
So she joined me and we partnered up. We kind of have a system in place. And so typically so the way it worked is I did all the open houses. Well, when I first got into real estate, I did all the open houses by myself. Then when she officially got licensed, what happened was she would do all of our follow-up calls. So she kind of acted as like an ISA in that regard, where she'd call my clients or all the leads in their database and basically set up appointments for me. So what would happen is she'd make all the phone calls, all the nurturing calls, stuff like that, because we had open house leads. We had, we did Facebook ads when I started getting extremely busy. We did a lot of other things as well too. So she did all that follow up, all that nurture process. And then I did all the showings. I did all the buyer on listing presentations. We did open houses together, which gave me the flexibility to still service a lot of our clients. So for example, let's say we would do an open house together on the weekend. What would happen would be, like, if I had, like, let's say a showing that would come up, I would set up the signs, because I put out a lot of signs for open houses, and then I would do the showing, but she would still be there to collect the new leads, the people that would come in. She'd be there to still meet them. So we never had to cancel an open house. We're always able to stay consistent with our open houses. Eventually got to the point where she had so much follow-up to do that it became hard for us to do open houses together. So that's actually how we brought our first agent onto our team. Is the reason we started growing the team in the first place, and the first agent ever joined us, is I was just looking for an agent to hold open houses with, because that was our lead source. So the idea was we bring an agent on board, we do open houses together, but then I had the flexibility to leave to do buyer consults, showing, stuff like that, and then they'd be there to still collect the business. And that was kind of right at the start of COVID when we brought our first agent on.
So, I mean, wow, that's incredible. That, like, look, I mean, a lot of the thing that happens, because a lot of agents that come into real estate, but they can't let their full-time jobs go. You just, like, you went for it. Like, you believed in yourself and you went for it. That's so rare. And then the reason I brought up the wife thing earlier is because we all know happy wife, happy life. It just sounded, I understand what you're saying. Some people don't like change, they're uncomfortable. So I understand she was supportive, just didn't like change. But that's interesting how it, like, you literally said, okay, I'm going to do this. And you went and did it, like, which is incredible. So quick question, and then I'm going to want to get into more tactical stuff. But so that first closing, like, and I don't need dollar amounts or whatever, but just to get an understanding, that first closing, how many weeks of payroll did that equate to from your previous job that you left?
Well, so I got paid a fairly decent amount, at my previous employer. I mean, it's about $80,000 a year is probably what I got paid, including bonuses and stuff like that. My first closing, though, was only $190,000. So this is back in 2017, and the market wasn't super crazy. So I have to remember exactly what the, imagine, 2.5%, 3% commission check of $190,000 transaction.
Yeah.
It was enough to pay down some of our debt, so we're able to kind of do that as well, too.
It was probably like a couple weeks. There's probably like a couple weeks of at your job.
Yeah. And when we first, one of the things you talk about quitting my job, one of the reasons why I was able to feel comfortable quitting my job is because I knew I wasn't the smartest person in the room. I knew that I wasn't salesy. Like, I don't like sales. It's not who I am. But one thing I knew is I would just outwork everyone. So at the end of the day, it wasn't about, like, me being like, I know everything. I feel comfortable doing this. To me, it's like, I'm just going to outwork everyone until I figure it out, and so that's kind of what I did.
I love that. The out hustle. That's, you and I are very relatable there. I love that, because that's the thing. Remember, like I told you, in my third year, I was number one. Well, I had the lowest price point in the room. I was willing to work harder, right? Like, I love that. I can relate to that big time. And so, obviously, like, if you're in California, like, if you ask me, then it's like, oh yeah, well, how about that transaction? Well, yeah, that was 6 months of working at my previous job. Just price point, right? I mean, but regardless, then you followed up with like 7 more transactions. So realistically, like, you must have did you have a little bit of savings? Like, when you made this jump, was there a little bit of reserves?
No, no reserves, no money in our bank account. We just bought a house. We put everything towards the down payment on our house. So we had no reserves. Credit card debt did mount a little bit. There were some months I couldn't pay off our entire credit card bill. Our my wife made decent money to pay some of our bills. It wasn't enough to cover everything, but it was a decent amount. That's why, like, when she got in the disability aspect of it, she's only getting paid 66% of her paycheck. So basically, she's getting paid 66 of a paycheck that couldn't support us anyways, you know. But by that point, because I had done so much work at the beginning, because a lot of times as agents we use excuses to say why we can't do something. But the reality is, like, you control what you can control today, and don't worry about the future. Just control what you do every single day, and then typically you can overcome those humps. But what happens is agents don't do the work right at the beginning, and then something bad happens. They say, okay, I can no longer be in real estate anymore. Well, if you would have done the activities at the beginning, you probably could have overcome that obstacle. And so fortunately, because me, I wasn't waiting for a moment to, to happen in my life. It just kind of happened. But because I came out working as hard as I could at the beginning, when my wife got in a car accident, that's when I started building up the momentum and I started closing the transaction. So we were able to kind of overcome that obstacle versus me now having to say, okay, I have to get out of real estate, go back to work because now we don't have any money coming in. I already kind of covered that because I did the work at the beginning. So by this point, then just kind of started kind of snowballing downhill, and we kind of support ourselves. And even when my wife quit her job, like, we had no money in our bank account, even to that, 6 months later. I mean, because of course I was going back to pay all of our credit card debt when I was closing the transactions. So it wasn't until probably about a year and a half to 2 years after getting into real estate that we actually started coming out ahead, where now we're able to start kind of our savings accounts and kind of like started, accumulating money that goes into reserves.
Mm-hmm. That's incredible that you stayed the course and you didn't waver, because it's easy to use the previous work as a crutch. Well, maybe one of us should go back. So I love that you stayed with it. That's incredible. It's absolutely. Now, do you think that knowing that you didn't have any backup, do you think that was extra motivation? Or are you the kind of person that doesn't matter? You're just going to get after it anyway?
Yeah, I mean, so it is. I mean, like, when it comes to real estate, like, there's a lot of agents that want to kind of test the waters in real estate and say, I want to get into a part time and a full time job and stuff like that, and I don't want to quit my job because I have I got to support my family, and I get that, right? And so I'm never going to sit there and tell someone that, hey, you have to go out there and quit your job, get in real estate full time, right? I'm not going to recommend that to anyone because everyone's got to know their own situation and stuff like that, but. I do find that typically if agents start off real estate full or part time and they have a full time job, then typically real estate becomes kind of the third priority, right? Because you have your first job, which is your main priority because that's paying your bills, stuff like that. And then your lifestyle outside of your job is your second priority, right? Family and friend functions, vacations, stuff like that. And then real estate kind of gets put on the back burner. But typically, if you don't have any other choice in order to kind of create that success, it definitely gives you that kind of motivation. And to me, I just knew I didn't want to go back to my previous lifestyle because I knew the pain that I had to go to working 60 hours a week, salary, getting, taken advantage of by my workplace, missing holidays, missing weekends. Like, the first year I was in real estate was the first year I spent Thanksgiving with my family since I was 15 years old because I had to work every single Thanksgiving. Well, I mean, the funny thing is, I didn't even live in the same state as them, and I actually spent Thanksgiving with them. So I was fly home, So I just got tired of missing all that stuff. So I just didn't want to go back to that. So that was kind of my motivation of, kind of staying that course.
Well, this is actually pretty impressive. I mean, you're doing what most people get into real estate dream of doing, and you were able to, like, just cross over quickly, and then you're able to, like, build success and then keep improving. I think that what I'd love to share with anyone that's watching this is, it's nice to have, like, the tactical steps, right? Because we all have our stories of how we became successful, but then it's like, okay, well, if someone wants to emulate what worked for us instead of reinventing the wheel, like, how can you break this down? Because obviously, like, it sounds like open houses were a big thing. Obviously, year over year, you kept improving, and then now you got to a point where you've actually built a team. Before we go into the whole team thing, just give us some steps here. Like, I'm a new agent. I'm willing to risk it all because I saw you do it and be successful. What's the game plan? Just like maybe just kind of an overview, like from a distance, just kind of like some main bullet points. Like, I just got my license. I just joined you. Like, what are you going to have me do? Like, how do I start this process? And then how can I work my way to having the same success you did?
Yep. So Oh, that's a good question. So there's multiple different things that are very important to know when you first get into real estate. First of all, you have to be very clear on who you are as a person, because and you have to know what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. What I mean by that is, there's a lot of different lead generation activities available out there, right? And every single lead generation activity that's out there works. We provide training all that lead generation activity, right? It all works, and nothing's like there's no secrets, right? It's all out there and to learn how to do this stuff. But you have to be very clear on who you are as a person. I'm a huge introvert, so I don't like to, I'm not a networking type guy. I don't like to just go out to events. That's not who I am. If someone told me that I had to cold call expired listings when I first got into real estate, I probably would fail out of this business pretty quick. Because again, that's not who I am. I don't like telemarketing. That's not my style. And so the reason why I chose open houses is because I realized that I'm an introvert. A lot of people will come to me. I didn't mind putting out a ton of signs because like I said, I'd outwork everyone anyways, and so that's kind of what my game plan was okay, I understood who I was, and then I got a very clear vision on what I wanted to do. And so when it comes to lead generation, you don't want to necessarily choose every single lead generation activity. You want to pick your top 2 or 3 lead sources that fits your style that you're going to be consistent with. So for me, it was open houses, right? That was my style. I added some other things like social media, stuff like that as well in there. But you want to get very clear who you are and then pick your 2 or 3 lead generation activities and then go out there and master those activities. Figure out, like for me for example, the open houses, I would do an open house and every single day before I would do an open house, I would rewatch the open house training, right? And then I would go out there and do it again. And then the next day, do an open house, I would rewatch the open house training, go back out there and do it again. So I really mastered the craft of doing open house. So no matter what your lead generation activity is, maybe someone else doesn't want to put out 30 to 40 signs, in Phoenix, 120-degree weather, maybe calling expires might be more their style. Maybe they prefer the cold calling aspect of it. Then great, go out there and do it and be consistent with it, but then you want to master that. But then the other thing that most agents struggle with more than anything else is creating a schedule for yourself, right? Most people don't go into the week with a plan. And so you want to create a plan that's going to be consistent. One of the reasons why I can tell you exactly how many open houses I did every single week for my first 3 years in real estate is because it was the exact same every single week. I did 22 open houses for the first 25 days in real estate. Then I did 5 open houses a week every single week for 6 months. Then my first full year in real estate was January, December. I did 3 open houses a week every single week for the entire year. My second full year in real estate, I did 2 open houses a week every single week for the entire year. Then eventually COVID happened in 2020 now. And so it became really hard to do open houses. But by that point, though, I built my business up so much anyways. I started getting a lot of referral and repeat business. So even though I wasn't doing any open houses in 2020, 2021, I had my best years where I sold 50 homes each year, even without doing an open house, because I still had leads that were coming to me that I met at open houses for the previous 3 years. And so you have to treat it like you have to create your own little schedule for yourself. And so I know with my open house for 5 open houses a week, I did an open house every single my days off from open house were Mondays and Thursdays. I would do an open house every Tuesday and Wednesday from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Then I would do an open house every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So another home. I would do a Friday from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. and Saturday and Sunday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And then I would tell the agent if I didn't have any other appointments that came up on Saturdays and Sundays, I would stay till 4 o'clock because I said so many times anyways. I might as well stay for a couple extra hours and get some extra business, So the next thing is you have to kind of create that schedule and then be consistent with that and then make that your non-negotiable. And if you do that, you'll have a ton of success in this industry.
So, you were talking about this open house video that you would watch. I mean, this must have been a pretty good video because you did some open houses. Can you let on what that is? Is that something through your brokerage? Was that something like, what was this video?
Yeah, so it's so when I first got into real estate, I actually joined a team. Didn't know I was actually joining a team. I never had intention of joining a team. So I actually joined a team that I thought was a brokerage at the time. And the team was owned by Joshua Smith. Some of you guys may know him. And so I joined his team. So I went through all his training, and Josh, for example, sold 48 homes his first year off open houses, right? So if you want to learn how to do open houses, recommend watching the video, right? So that's typically, I watched all his training that he created. I didn't sell 48 homes my first year, but I sold 18, which is still pretty good if I didn't do everything to the T that he said. But, if I would have, I probably would have sold a lot more. And so And so that's actually one of the reasons that, and we'll get into it later, but that's one of the reasons, I've always been with Josh. He's been a huge mentor of me. And so, even when we moved over to EXP, that's why I moved over to him. So now we're able to provide all of our agents that are within our organization the exact same training that I went through. He might have, I don't know if he has some YouTube videos out there, someplace with open houses as well too, but he is a university, GSD mode university that all of our agents get access to. That provides all that training, the exact same training that I went through in order to create the success I did.
That's so, it's interesting because, like I don't really like open houses. I mean, I do them and I take care of my clients, but I think that the aspect that I don't like is the fact that, like, I think I told Jerry when we were talking, that like, I don't cold call or door knock. Like, I'm willing to talk to strangers, but one thing that's weird is sometimes people come to the open house, they're very cold or like get away from me type of vibe. And that kind of irritates me. Right. So it's like, clearly, like you said, you weren't a salesperson or whatever, but you clearly developed some skills to be able to like actually take enjoyment. I mean, yeah, the back of your mind's like, I got to do this. I want to be successful. I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm the same way. Like, to lose this weight that I had to lose, I don't care what I drink or eat, like whatever. I don't care if it tastes like crap. I don't care if I have to be out before the sunrise in 30-degree weather. I know it's pretty cold for Arizona, but I'm just saying, like, I don't like, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. And my question is this. So like, knowing, like, evaluating this. So did you have to have like thick skin, and did you have to just bite the bullet and be like, I really want to be successful, I'm going to do this? Or did you find a way to take enjoyment in just doing these open houses, no matter who came through the door?
Obviously open houses are a lot of work. I mean, like I said, I put about 30, 50 signs, and sometimes if I'm in the summer, it's like 120-degree weather in Phoenix. It's not necessarily the most fun thing in the world. But I knew what else am I going to do? I mean, I got done working 60 hours a week. And so it's like, all right, well, the way I thought about it is I'm like, okay, I need to create a schedule for myself while I'm working 40 hours a week. So it's like, hey, I'm going to go ahead and do this. It allowed me to talk to people. So I think I learned a lot. Looking at homes, I thought was kind of cool. Obviously being inside the homes was not bad. I did some things while I was at the open house. So I kind of created it as like my house for the day.
Mm-hmm.
I say I'm not salesy because I don't like to sell anything. But at the end of the day, I'm passionate, and I'm passionate about things I believe in. And so, for example, I'm passionate about home ownership. I believe it can create generational wealth. I believe, so to me, I'm not selling anything, right? I'm not selling a home. I'm not selling anything like that, because I think it's in everyone's best interest to buy a home, so it's not like I'm a door-to-door solar salesman that people can argue if it makes sense or not or anything like that. And the second thing too, when it comes to sales, is it wasn't like I felt like I was selling anyone anything, but I also believe in myself. And so a lot of times when I'm talking to a lead that's coming into the home, for one, you have to learn communication skills, right? How to talk to people and just have that conversation, and just talking to people about being interested in their lives. Who are they? What type of person they are? Stuff like that. But then also too, from a communication aspect of it, or a sales aspect of it, like I believe that I knew that in my heart, I would outwork every single person that I would come across. And so the reality is that when a lead would come into the open house, I knew that it was in their best interest to use me as their agent, because I knew that I would care about them more than most agents would. I knew that I would outwork everyone. I knew I'd be available. I have clients that would call me at midnight, 11 o'clock all the time, answer the phone, and so I knew that it wasn't like I was trying to sell them anything. To me, it's like I'm doing them a favor by working with them, because I was their best option to accomplish their goals. Same thing with the team. Like, I feel like if an agent doesn't join our organization, everyone's got their own goals, stuff like that. But I felt like our team provides so much value to the agents that are within our organization that an agent's make a mistake if they don't join us. Now, a lot of agents don't join us, just like I had a lot of buyers and sellers that didn't use me. And there are a lot of other good agents out there, just like there are a lot of other good teams out there. But I also know statistically, there's a lot of agents that aren't very good either. And so I wanted to make sure that I didn't allow some of these people that I met to use someone that was doing a terrible job or didn't have their best interests in heart. So that's kind of the way I always approach it. So I didn't mind talking to people and trying to help people, because that's all I care about. My experience in customer service. So I always tell people that, like, I'm not in sales, I'm in customer service. And so I'm going to take care of my clients to a nice level. And so that was important for me.
That's a good point. I didn't think about it that way. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I'd love to do like a separate session on open houses with you, because I mean, you're one of the more well-versed people that I've met that's had a lot of success. So is that something you'd be interested in, doing a little session on open houses? Are you burned out, or are you still willing to talk about it?
Oh yeah, I'd definitely be willing to do that. I actually, I just released on my YouTube channel. I actually just released a video, 5 biggest mistakes the agents make when doing open houses. So
I'll have to check that out.
Yep, I have no. I actually sat out to my team yesterday as well too, because open houses. I also see people like struggle with them, and they get discouraged and say this isn't working for me. But a lot of times, the 5 mistakes I release are really the main reason why most people struggle when it comes to open houses. And so that's why I created the video for it, and everything like that. But I had no problem even doing like a full blown open house training or anything like that.
Mhm. No, I'd love to do that. Well, look, I mean, I know we're kind of running to the end of our time here, but I wanted to at least touch on the fact that obviously you built this, and then, you mentioned your coach a couple of times. Obviously, the value of, instead of reinventing the wheel, getting to a certain point, and if you want to level up, maybe going to someone who's already been there. Was that your inspiration for hiring a coach? And is that what catapulted you then to build your team?
Yeah, I mean, so it was I didn't so I was on a team, so I didn't necessarily hire the coach, but the person I was on the team on, a lot of people
Oh,
hire.
that's right. I'm sorry. So he was the leader of your team. My
Yeah,
apologies.
he was leading, so I didn't necessarily hire the coach, but that was it. Is a lot of people paid money for him to coach them, so yeah,
I'm aware of that.
I
Yeah.
paid splits and stuff like that,
Got it.
um, but I do feel like, it's important for people to have the right coaching mentorship, because what happens is, and I talk about this even with agents that I'm talking to about joining our organization, like the biggest number one mistake that agents make when choosing a brokerage, in my personal opinion, is choosing a brokerage solely based off of their splits and how much they make per transaction. I think at the end of the day, how much you make per transaction, this may be an unpopular opinion, but I think how much you make per transaction does not matter. There are two things that matter way more than how much you make per transaction. The first is, what is your hourly rate, right? Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much you make per transaction, how much do I make per hour, right? Because then the more hours you work, the more money you make. And the second is, how much money do you make per year in real estate, right? If you join a brokerage that, let's say, has 100% commission, but they don't provide any training or coaching to go out there and teach you how to sell more homes, it doesn't matter what the splits are, because you're not going to sell any homes anyways. Whereas if you join the right organization, even if you have specific splits, you're going to be selling a lot more homes. Same thing with as a team, right? I'd be willing to argue that most agents on my team make more money per hour than most independent agents. And the reason for that is because of the fact that we provide so many resources that takes a lot of work off their plate, that they're actually making a lot more money per hour. Right? And I have math equations. I can actually break it down and show you how agents on my team are making typically more money per hour. And so that's the kind of thing but getting back to your original question, as far as mentorship, a lot of times what happens is, if you don't have the right coaching mentorship, agents start spinning their wheels. They do unnecessary tasks, or they start doing lead generation activities that really aren't moving the needle forward. Whereas if you can have someone that teaches you the exact steps every single way, what to do, and you don't have to go out there and recreate it or figure it out on your own, it makes it so much more efficient for you to start creating that success. And so that's one of the biggest things that had an impact on my life, and why I was able to start having success fairly quick, is I had the right people on my court and the right mentorship. So I didn't have to go out there and figure it out on my own. I basically just went right to the person who was basically, and Josh was selling, he sold over 7,000 homes in his career. He's a pretty good person to learn from. So that's kind of what I did, and just said, hey, instead of me figuring it out, I'm just going to learn from people who've already had it figured out.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, and you did mention that it was his team. So my apologies because I think him as the coach, but you actually had, the privilege of actually being part of the organization. Yeah, and it's interesting what you had to say too, like your time per hour and what you're doing. And yeah, I mean, some people want to reinvent the wheel, or some people they think that, because you have this big split, that you're going to make more money and everything. But you're right. I mean, you do have to consider all of it. I think that when you start split and cost shopping, it's when you're more seasoned, like you have your established business. Like someone like myself, when I moved to this brokerage 5 years ago, it made more sense financially. That's where I was at. I think that when you're early in your career, I'm with you on highly recommending, instead of reinventing the wheel, putting yourself in a position to be successful, even if you gotta, share some of the money to actually get up there. Because look, I'm a big proponent for doing referral business. I always tell clients or agents that I mentor, I'd rather make 75% of something than 100% of nothing. And I think that kind of ties in as well, where, it's a kind of a volume play, but at the same time, you're learning as you go and refining your craft, and eventually you'll be able to spread your wings, but you have a good foundation. But yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and especially having the support and the training and everything else. And look where we're at. We have more training and more tools than we can ever use. I oh, and actually another thing too that I do want to mention while we're talking about this stuff too is, like, when you're talking about how you pick 2 or 3 lead sources or things to focus on, along with having too many tools, like a lot of agents get distracted with the shiny objects. Oh, I just saw a presentation today at door knocking. I saw this, or I saw that, or I saw this. I could do this. I like the fact that you talk about focusing on 2 or 3. That's something I mentor as well. Because if you want to become successful, it's like earlier, like I was telling you about myself, like when I had too many things, you can be the jack of all trades and master and none if you don't really focus. And like you said, you perfected your craft on the open houses. I think that's another thing to mention too, is that obviously when you're under the tutelage, under the watchful eye, like, someone that's your mentor, your coach, that's been there, done that, if they can kind of help you stay focused. Like you talked about playing to your strengths and what your skills were. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And you need to have some kind of coaching. Now, did your idea then to build your team come based off your experiences being part of a team? Is that what was next? Is that why that came next?
Well, so the first agent that we had join our team, like I said, was specifically just to do open houses with. And so that's the first agent we ever recruited. We had a couple other agents in the next couple of years join our team, just looking for some additional mentorship and coaching. Though the reality is the reason why we started building a team is I'm a firm believer if you're going to do anything, you be passionate about it. And after so many years in real estate and production, I started getting burnt out. And so about beginning of 2022, we all know what happened at the beginning of 2022, right? Interest rates started increasing, right? So when interest rates started increasing, I saw the writing on the wall that it was going to be harder to go out there and get business. And I knew that if I needed to support my family, I'd have to go out there and grind and work and, and I didn't mind working hard or anything like that, but I started to kind of lose my passion. So what I started realizing is I would do open houses, but I wasn't having as much success with them, right? Because I was going there, I was just kind of going through the motions. I wasn't really actively going there and putting the time in to get the appointments, asking for the appointments and all that stuff. And so at that point, because I started getting burnt out, I'm like, all right, I need to go. I'm like, but I like the idea of helping people. I like the whole idea of helping agents. And so it's like, all right, well, at this point, I'm going to kind of go full force on building a team, because if I was trying to get burnt out on the production aspect, what I'll do is I'll just hire or bring out a bunch of agents who are not burnt out yet, who still have that desire, who have that hunger and stuff like that. And I'll teach them, coach them everything I've done to create that success, and let them go out there and create success for themselves too, and kind of give back to the agent community. And so that's kind of why we started building a team. At that point, is I was just kind of getting burnt out from my own personal production standpoint. Selling 50 homes a year, it just takes a toll on you, and even though I still had flexibility, but I'd go on vacations. Like I tell this story one time. I was on a cruise one year, and while I was on this cruise, I ended up selling like 9 homes. I don't know if you've ever been on a cruise before, but it is extremely hard to use the internet. And so I'm basically sitting in my room, hitting refresh on my computer the entire time to try to send out things for my clients to electronically sign. And my wife was by the pool enjoying herself having a drink, so it just, it took a toll on like a lot of my vacations, a lot of my personal time with my family. Just because I was working so hard from the real estate standpoint. I could do it from wherever I wanted to, but my vacations weren't always like my vacations. So, that's kind of the reasons we started growing the team.
I'm guilty. Like I take a satellite phone, I rent a satellite phone. Trust me, like I was offshore last summer for, almost a week fishing like bluefin and yellowtail, 120 miles off the coast of California out of San Diego, like 120 miles offshore. There's no reception. I mean, you're on a boat like 12 to 14 hours just straight out. So it's a chance to get away and have an excuse, but not Shane. I gotta stay connected. Here's my sat phone. Guys look at me, how's your phone work out here? I'm like, satellite phone. Like, man, you're like obsessed. I'm like, not necessarily obsessed, but gotta handle business. But yeah, no, I get that. The burnout thing too, it's funny you touched on that. As much as we love and we're passionate, we work so hard, we all go through burnout. And I remember 2015, because, we're from Portugal. My parents are immigrants. We have a house in the islands, in the Azores Islands, off the coast of Portugal. And every summer I go spend a couple of weeks there. But remember in 2015, I was really burned out. I was doing relocation and I was up with a big corporate brokerage. And they just were taking a lot of splits. They didn't follow through with things they promised me. And I had some clients that tried to burn us on all the repairs. I paid all my contractors, so my contractors don't get screwed. And I just I don't know. It's just like, you're already like, kind of like, these emotions are kind of worn out. And then all of a sudden the negative stuff, then all of a sudden it's like the glass is half empty. And so I still remember, going out to our place, my family had already come back and I was at the house by myself and I was there for about 4 weeks, an island with only 8,000 people on it. That's when I grew all this facial hair and I kept it because apparently it looked good. but I was like castaway, and it was interesting because, yeah, I spent 4 weeks really thinking about what I wanted to come back and do, and I came back and I changed brokerages and took my business kind of a different direction. Um, I feel like I'm glad you share that. I feel like it's healthy to actually, obviously this is what I did. That's what you did. We all kind of have our moments. And, but have you noticed that in that moment, you're actually leveling up? It's almost like it's not regression. It's just almost like how you transition to the next step, right? It's both with a burnout or with failures, or you know what I mean? And it probably seems unnatural at first. Like you probably felt a little weird, right? Because it's like you were so obsessed with it when you started. Did you feel uncomfortable feeling that way?
I mean, so I always like helping agents. So again, I've always been kind of into coaching. I wanted to be a football coach when I was like in high school, when I grew up, and my mom wanted me to be a teacher, and so I've always been passionate about helping and training and coaching different people. I didn't, I do agree with you that that's a step up. I think you always gotta have that natural progression of like, okay, what's next in my career, because I've done this. Okay, now what do I need to move? I think that's where it's very important to get very clear on who you are, because like that was a very honest discussion I had with myself, right? Most people are afraid to admit that they got burnt out and they're just going through the motions, right? And so you have to have that very clear self-realization saying, hey, this is what's going on, and this is what I need to do to kind of advance my career and take a step further. Because at the end of the day, I mean, me and my wife didn't have a job. I mean, we were, it was all commission based, so it was on us to support ourselves. I had a mortgage to pay. I had, feed me and her, and stuff like that. And so that was kind of one of those things where it's like, well, I didn't want to go back to the point where I was like not able to, because I knew that what was going to go happen with the market. And so fortunately, ever since then, we've continued to, even with down markets, we've continued to see our transaction volume as a team continue to increase over every single year as well too. So it's been obviously a good decision, and I love the fact of the amount of agents that I've been able to have an impact on, because a lot of agents on our team are selling more homes than they've ever sold before, which is super exciting for me as well too, because I love seeing their successes in the industry.
That is exciting for people that are selfless. Like your personality, I really admire that, because you find joy in other people's success. And that's kind of ironic to hear that in real estate, which can be such a cutthroat business where it's everybody against each other. And, obviously we're colleagues here in the same brokerage. And it's interesting because this is the only brokerage I've ever been at where I've seen that kind of collaboration and that kind of like love. Like, honestly, like I love hearing that. I love hearing that because, and from being in other places, oh no, actually you actually had the pleasure of actually being in a good place before. But for some of us that have been in other places, it's a drastic change when we get to where we're at now. Sounds like you, though, obviously got to, your journey seems to have come through being around good people always, which is a blessing. But for some of us, we've had to be in those types of places, and it's an ugly world. It's pretty cutthroat out there, and nobody really cares about each other, helping each other. So I love that you look out for your clients. I love that you look out for your agents. I love that, you obviously have a good relationship with your partner. You and, you and your wife really like, work. Sounds like you work well together. I'm sure you have your moments, but I love that you've built such a successful business, and to be able to go up year over year and to be able to adapt and be successful. That's a big thing. And, I really appreciate your time and having you on today. I'd like to, obviously give people a way to contact you. For anyone that's interested in getting to know more about your strategy and about your market and about you, what's the best way to contact you?
Yeah, I mean, so they can either contact me on, I'm on Instagram, Scott Kumler AZ Realtor. I'm on Facebook, Scott Kumler. You can friend request me on there. Follow me on Instagram. I like Facebook a little bit better just because Instagram, if someone like follows you and then they send you a message, like you don't see it all the time until like you like having to go look in your spam messages or whatever. Otherwise, you can send me a text. My cell phone number is 623-387-2688. I always recommend texting me just because sometimes I get so much spam calls that a lot of times I will, may not answer a phone call that's not valid or a number I don't recognize. You can leave a voicemail though, and if I listen to it, I'll call you back. I'm pretty good about responding to texts and voicemails for people that are not spam. So, I can also send you my calendar link too. I have a calendar link if someone wants to book like a Zoom meeting with me to kind of see, what we're doing over here. I have no problem, sharing that as well too.
Awesome. No, I appreciate that. We'll definitely put that in here. And shoot, man, I'm dead serious about coming back and doing something at open houses. That would be great.
For sure, man.
But hey, man, thanks so much for being here today. And yeah, have a good rest of your evening, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, man. Appreciate having me on. You guys take it easy.
Yeah.